All right, so we left off where we were going to make a selection of this climber. So I'm going to start with my quick selection tool, and some of this is going to be really simple to select and some won't be as easy. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm clicking around because I find that sometimes whenever I click and drag, it selects a little bit too much sometimes. So and I think I need to lower my brush size a little bit. And yeah, see, so I'm getting way too much stuff now. And so, yeah, what I'll end up doing then is I'll just go ahead and select what I can, and then I'll just finish this out with a quick selection, or excuse me, a quick mask paint option. So let's just go ahead and grab what we can, and then make sure. I'm not going to get the rope, I don't think. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave the rope out of it for right now. Yeah, it's grabbing an awful lot. And so I'm going to also go ahead and click on my option key, and I'm removing some of the other selection. Yeah, so right there it gets confusing because the tattoo is very similar to the surrounding shapes. So I'll do that. All right, so let's do the rest with the painting tools. I'm going to jump over here into my quick mask, and we're going to go grab my paintbrush, and I'm going to check and see that my brush has a little bit more hardness added to it. I'll do a slightly larger brush. Now if I go and uh, I, I swap my foreground background color. Now if I come in, let's zoom back out just a little bit, and I can start to remove some. Now that I swapped those colors out, I can remove the places that dug too deeply into the figure. Okay. All right, I think that's a pretty good selection. And so now if I get out a quick select, I can go up here and I'm going to just save the selection, and I will call this climber. I'll just call it climber 1 in case later I decide to make other additions like the rope and things like that. I think that the reason I'm not doing the rope is I think that it might actually kind of it might look a little weird. It might just look like a mistake. All right, and so anyway, what I'll do here is I'm going to duplicate the rock climber layer right there, and I am going to create a mask. All right, and so you won't be able to see the difference, right? But until I turn this off, now you can see the difference. And if I needed to go back in and clean up that mask, like maybe the leg is a little soft in places, like maybe the brush was a little soft in here, I can always do that. And that's not a big deal. All I'd have to do is, I could do it one of two ways. I can either right click here and I can say select and mask, and then I can, you know, take a look at my borders, you know, to see how it looks. I can also do it this way. Really, it's kind of up to you how you would want to address it. But see how soft and feathered that edge is? I probably needed to use something that was a little bit of a harder edge. And so what I can do is I can increase the smoothness. I can increase the contrast, and I can shift the edge out a little bit there, and I can also see other places where it kind of is a little messy out in the perimeter areas. So maybe I don't want to shift the edge quite that much. I can do maybe more contrast, and maybe I can feather it like maybe 0.1 or something. And I'm seeing some other places that I might need to adjust and smooth. All right, so that's one way. The other way is that I could have also taken that through the channels and done it that way as well. And so I can also come in and I'll take my brush tool and oops, not that way. And I'm holding down my Option key. So I'm going to take my brush tool and clean up some spots that seem like obvious problems for me. So that might be a little bit better. I'll turn it up a little bit more. Somewhere in there. And then I'm going to, for the output settings, we can also say decontaminate color, right? And so it helps with some of that fringing in places. And let me see up here. I think I've got a problem with what's happening on the edge of this helmet. So we can work with that. I'm going to choose new layer with layer mask. I'll click OK. And then I'm going to call this one original. And then we'll call this one refined. Okay. And then that looks a little bit cleaner, I think, whenever we go and turn that back on. I'm going to now drag this on top of or above the logo filled option, and then I can kind of see better what I have right here. And if I want, now that here's the thing, you might go, oh, and I could just move her around. Well, you can to some degree, but you need to be very careful because remember, like I said before, we've got this crevasse right here. And if you start moving it too much, you're going to misalign it with the crevasse and then it will look a little bit awkward. And so just be really careful about that. So like I think that her foot can come down just a hair so that it's sitting on this R. I think that would be okay. So if I take my move tool and I nudge her down, I think that that helps. And then what I also am noticing is that there's a little bit of fringing on the edge of the foot that's getting in the way of this R. And so I think in order for that to look really effective, I need to get rid of it because it looks too soft and weird right there. And then I think there's also maybe in the hand area, I think I need to make some adjustments up here in this hand area as well. Now what I think that I would like to do is go ahead and show you another way that you can deal with this. And remember, before I showed you something about channels, if you go up here to Window and you look for your channels, you can open up your channels, and because I've got that selected, it shows up in the channels. And if I turn it on, instead of using Refine and Refine Edge or Select and Mask or one of those things, then what you can do is you can just come in here and directly edit the mask using the entire array of your selection tools, just like you're in quick mask mode. And so I think that I like that idea better. And so I'm going to take my paintbrush up here and let's give it a pretty hard edge, maybe something like that. And then I'm going to come in and clean this up because it really, I think that it is actually quite noticeable. And this is the problem right here that I was talking about before. If I want that to look like the shoe has been, it's like flattening out on the R like that, then that's how I can adjust it. Okay. All right. And if we zoom back out, I think that that might look a little bit cleaner. And now we can just turn that off and we can see. And I think that that looks a whole lot cleaner. All right. And so now we've got the climber on top, right? And that's pretty cool. And so the thing now that we have to deal with is how to, fill in the rest of this picture. And so I would make a new layer on top so that we're doing this non-destructively. I don't want to rasterize this. So if I make this layer, let's call this retouching. Let's call it rock retouching. Or how about rock wall retouching? Okay. And on this layer, we're going to use some correction tools, and I'll show you how you can blend them in. So if we go over here, say to spot healing, for instance, what I can do is I can click on sample all layers, and so it'll let me sample all of the layers, especially the one that's below it is the one that's really going to address. And so I can do something like that really easily, and if I turn that off, I still have my bottom layer visible, which is great. But one thing I am noticing though is that this just becomes very, very dark. And so I can also try to do something like dodging and burning. So if I want to dodge it because it's too dark, dodging is whenever you make it lighter, burning is when you make it darker. This isn't one that allows me to sample all of the layers. My bad. What I actually would need to do, and I can do very easily, is I can also go here right above the rock climber if I want to do this, and I can add another new layer, and we'll call this dodge burn. And what we can do here is we go up to edit, and then we go to fill, and then we can add 50% gray like that. And then what we need to do is take this and give it an overlay. So you can't really see any change because it's a completely 50% gray is completely neutral. It's the absolute center of the gamma tones, of the midtones. And so from that point, if you dodge or burn, you're lightening or darkening something. So this is the one that I would want to dodge right here. And so I can also turn up the exposure to 100%. I can dodge it some more, and you can. It happens very slowly, but you can see it getting lighter. And let's see what if I go into the midtones, and oh, there we go. There's a lot of gray in there, and so, and you can see that part got really bright. So I'm going to undo that. I want to try to stay within that area, and then it's like less of a deep dark area, right? And I'm going to zoom in a little and kind of get this. Oops, try to stay away from that. And then I can also switch over here to the burn tool a little, and I can do that so that it, well, that's a little bit much. Let's turn the exposure of the burn tool down a little bit. Let's undo that. Actually, let's do highlights, because I want to try to get these highlights so that they're not so bright right around this edge here. Okay, and now if I were to turn this off, you can see the difference of how much of an eyesore that dark area is off to the left bottom corner, right? And this is a lot more, it's a lot more subtle. The one thing about it though is that there's a lot of this sort of orange color in some of these rock areas, and so we could also do something where we painted in an adjustment layer as well. But there are a lot of like these little retouching things that you can do, and so I'm going to suggest that you kind of continue to play around with this. I'm going to grab this rock wall retouching, and I want to show you really quickly. If I go over here to the patch tool, one of the things you'll notice is that the patch tool does not have an option to use on multiple layers, which is unfortunate. But what we can use instead is the content aware move tool. And what I want to do is I want to select my rock wall retouching layer again, and I want to go up here to my options for the move tool, and I want to make sure that extend is chosen. And I'm going to, your settings might not be like this, but turn the color all the way up to 10 so that it does the best that it can do with blending in the colors, and then make sure that sample all layers is is turned on, and then you can do transform on drop. Whenever you drop it, it'll make the adjustments and the changes. Okay, so what I would want to do is I want to take this section that's right along here, and I'm going to kind of pull from this larger section, and I'm going to drag it, and while I'm on the rock wall retouching, it should come in there, and I'll deselect, and you'll see that I've kind of got a mess over here with the way that it is trying to duplicate all of this stuff. So this is the one thing I don't really love about the move tool, is that sometimes it doesn't really do exactly what you hope that it will do. It doesn't blend it as well. You can, then go in there with a spot healing brush if you want and try to blend some stuff in as best you can, so that it seems a little bit more unique and less the way that it actually is, right? So that it looks like maybe this is just a whole variegated area. But I think that this looks kind of flat and weird, to be perfectly honest. And so you can use the move tool sometimes quite successfully, but sometimes I think that it's not the best choice. And so I'm actually going to come back up, and I'm going to go all the way back up to where I was doing my dodging and burning. And I'm going to show you another way to think about this, and that is I'm going to take my original rock wall image, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm actually going to rasterize it. And well, actually before I rasterize it, I'm going to do something else so that it still maintains its good high resolution. I'm going to go ahead and I'll do a free transformation, and I'm going to move it so that it's just over to the edge, and I'm going to actually pull it down, and I'll extend it, and I'm going to distort it just a little bit, but I'm kind of okay with distorting it just a little bit, and part of that is part of the reason for that. And look what's happening to where I dodged and burned. So I might have to take some of that dodging and burning that I did out, but I'm gonna take it like this, and yeah, I think I'll leave it like that. And the reason I'm gonna do that is because this image is totally going to withstand. It's got the high resolution, it's going to withstand everything, but you'll notice what's happening here with my person, right, and the crevasse, it's all misaligned, but that's okay. I'm going to commit to this. Oh, and also some of these crevices over here that I had gotten rid of before are back. So we're going to make some adjustments. And what I'll do is I'm going to now rasterize this layer, the one that I just changed. And what that's going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to erase parts of it and then do some other stuff. But the big part of it is that I need to be able to erase parts. I could mask it, that I could do. Either way, it's really up to you. You can, I still have my original non-destructive layer version, and so that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and show you one of the ways that you can do it, just like with the eraser tool. So I'm going to, first of all, start getting rid of, turn this eraser up so it's at 100%. I want to 100% get rid of this extra climbing person and the extra crack that's there. And I want to make sure that the highlights are in this area are nice and strong, right? And there we go. All right, and I don't want to go quite that far. All right, so, and then that's where I could like go and use the blending tool if I needed to or something. I could do something like this as well, but then you start to see the duplication. So it's really kind of up to you. I can also take my opacity and turn it down significantly, and I can start to get rid of some of this. It gets a little bit muddy if I do that, so I kind of don't think I like that. I like the nice crispness. I can also just turn that off or make adjustments to it, right? And so that's a little bit dark and heavy. I think I actually do want that on, but I just need to make some adjustments. So maybe what I'll actually do is just take a sample. Let's choose this, and I'm going to just go ahead and take a sample. Let's turn all of these off so that I just get my dodge and burn layer. I'll for a second go back to where it says normal. I'm going to take a quick sample with my eyedropper tool so I can get that perfect medium gray, and then I can turn all this stuff back on again. All right, and let's fill it with my paint bucket. We're just going to fill. Okay, so that's fully filled. And now I can go back and turn it to an overlay. All right, and so we've got something that we can work with a little bit better now. If I go back over here and I can go back to my, dodge and burn tools, I'll go back to dodge. I'm going to make a much larger brush, and I'll start maybe with the midtones, because I think that's where the majority of the problem was actually in the midtones, not in the shadows. And that's already better, I think. And I don't want to go too far, because then I might make it feel really bizarre. If I go into the shadows, I can dodge some of those as well. All right, and then I think that actually looks pretty darn good. That's not bad, and it totally looks realistic. It looks a lot better than it did when I used the move tool, and it's really subtle. Okay, and so this is a good place to stop. And if you wanted now to take a quick look and see, like, all right, well, what would happen if I did that? Looks good. If I did that, looks good. And you know that what you're doing is going to translate well. And the other thing too is that remember that in addition to getting this exact size for the square one, if you decide that you want a little bit more breathability around it and you don't want the logo to fill up so much of it, you can also go to the crop preset of 1:1 square, and you can see what that would look like. And that might actually be something that you like better in terms of the extra space that's around it. And even though the 1080 by 1080 for the square is the Instagram size, you can have something that is larger than that. And in fact, sometimes that's actually better to have a larger image with more resolution, more pixel data than their suggested size, because then, as long as it's not too large, and it will downsample, or it'll use the better quality one as long as it's got the square dimension, right? Just know that if it gets smaller for a 1080, that your actual logo might end up looking like physically smaller. So if you want the logo to be nice and large at 1080 by 1080, and you want to know exactly how that's supposed to look, then you would want to do something like that instead, right? Because just remember that if you do something that's that big, then what would end up happening is that whenever it does downsample to 1080 by 1080, this whole thing will shrink down by about this margin's worth, right? A little bit smaller. Okay, so we're all done here, and you can move on.